All right, so you now know all the basic components of a good sales call: introductions, qualifying, and closing. So let's get to the more advanced components. This section is about something we all encounter on our sales calls, but most of the time we don't know what to say or do. This next lesson is about overcoming objections, and it will teach you how to handle every objection in the book, from the standard, "We don't use hospice," to the difficult, "Your agency did a bad job with one of my patients." Are you ready to learn how to handle objections? Here we go. Sixth module, Overcoming Objections. Lesson 1, Handling Objections.
So you've gotten good at asking for referrals. And what do we know? If you haven't made the person you're talking to comfortable that you're going to be the best place for their hospice referrals, you're going to get an objection. If you're talking to someone new and they're trying to get rid of you, you're going to get an objection. When people give you an objection, all they're doing is saying what? Bye-bye. Thanks so much for coming by. Nice of you to come by. We'll see you later. No, go away. Pick how you want to look at it. But when you get an objection, you really have two choices. You can overcome the objection, or you can tuck your tail, turn, and leave. Clearly the first is the best. And I think that we can put you in a position, I know we can put you in a position, that there's absolutely positively no objections that you can't overcome. Nothing. You'll be so prepared that absolutely, no matter what, you're going to be able to handle those objections. So let's talk first about what do we mean by handling an objection. Handling an objection is not selling somebody anything. It's not winning the war. It's just getting the opportunity to have a further conversation. The first rule in handling objections is to let the people know it's okay. It's all right. Of course you feel that way. Because, again, they're telling you an objection because they're trying to get rid of you. So we do not want to get into a situation where we're arguing about it. We're trying to make them wrong, because what happens if we prove them wrong? We win the battle and lose the war. So it's not about making the customer wrong. It's about having the opportunity to have a further conversation. And that's all it is. So don't overthink it, don't over-engineer it. It's someone says no, and you've given them a logical reason to have a further conversation. That's all it is to handle an objection. And we're going to talk about three different pieces. Okay, two ways to strategically handle objections, and the third one being to be prepared. So the first one is the instant reverse. Okay, and that can take multiple forms, but the easiest one and the one that everybody seems to like is when you're given the objection, you say, "That's exactly why I'm here." And again, what did we say about handling objections? It's making it okay. Of course you feel that way. We're going to go on and talk further. That's exactly why I'm here. Another version of that is, "I'm so glad you brought that up. Thank you so much for sharing that with me. I can see how important that is to you. Let's talk about that." We're telling them it's okay. Let's talk further. Our second method is the feel, felt, found method. Now, feel, felt, found has been around for a long time, and any of you that have had sales training have probably had some variation of that. But it works really well to handle the objections. And you do not have to say the words feel, felt, found in each step, but that's what we're looking for. That's our idea behind each of the three statements you're going to make to go from objection to having handled the objection. You're saying in the first step, "I know exactly how you feel. I understand exactly how you feel." It's the feel piece. Others have felt the same way. You're not alone. Okay? We want to make sure that they understand that this is not something that's unique to them. And then the found statement is, but what they found was that we were really the best solution for their hospice needs, or whatever that statement you're going to make is. So feel, felt, found. I know exactly how you feel. Others have felt the same way, but what they found was we were the best hospice choice. So do you see how that takes someone from telling you no to getting there? And as I said, you don't have to use the words feel, felt, found. So let's throw an example out there. A really common objection that we hear is, we already have a hospice we work with. Well, yeah, I guess so. If I've done my qualifying and I've found out that they have hospice patients and they're not using us, I would expect them to use somebody, right? And yet, repeatedly, we get students that say, but how do we handle that? They tell me they've already got a hospice that they love, and I don't know what to do. And it's because they haven't taken it, looked at it, figured out their response, and be prepared in advance. So, someone tells me, we already have a hospice we're happy with. What am I going to do? Feel, felt, found. Of course you have a hospice you work with. I would expect you to have one or more hospices. Others, as a matter of fact, some of my best referral partners told me the same thing the first time I met them. But what they found was that there were certain patients for which we were going to be the best hospice provider care. Tell me a little bit more about how you use hospice. Now tell me a little bit more about how you use hospice is my probing question after I've handled the objection. Okay? So I've said it's okay. Of course you have other hospices you use. Others, my best referral partners, told me the same thing I first talked to them. But what they found was there were certain patients that we were the best choice for. We're painting the picture that not every patient is served best by every hospice. Okay? We're painting the picture that maybe there might be differences and there might be reasons that we would want them to refer for specific types of patients. The third thing that we want you to be thinking about is using the instant reverse, using the feel, felt, found method. You should determine what your responses are going to be for the top 6 objections you hear in your territory. So think about that. If you haven't been making calls, you're new to this, then get with some of the other salespeople in the organization and find out from them what's common. But keep your ears out open because you may get other ones just because of your style or the type of accounts you're calling on. But make a list of the top 6. If you identify the 6 most common objections that you're going to hear, and you have prepared a response for each one of those 6, and you've practiced it, you've role-played it, you've got it down cold, then what's going to happen? You hear one of those, by definition it's your most common one, so it's going to cover you 90% of the time, and you immediately think, I know that one. So instead of them giving you, we had a problem in the past with your hospice, and you getting the deer in the headlights look and then tucking tail and leaving, if they say, we had a problem in the past with your hospice, you're thinking, I know that one. I got this down, right? And then you can respond. And by responding, what I'm saying is, again, we're going to handle the objection. It's not right or wrong. It's not proving them right or wrong. It's not problem solving. It's purely about handling the objection, which says that I have the ability to have a further conversation. So let's take that example. Mike, we don't use you guys because you had messed up some of our patients in the past. Or, your nurse never showed up on time. Well, actually, I'll tell you a little funny story about someone that came through our training program, the Square One training program, who was a hospice nurse for many years. And he had been promoted to being a salesperson in this organization. And he actually came to boot camp before having made any sales calls. So he knew hospice, was a nurse by training, but this was really his first sales calls were in the boot camp class, going through the exercises and doing the role plays. And he was really good at following directions. So we told him about feel, felt, found, how it worked. And we said, what do you think is going to be the most common objection you're going to hear? And the objection he came up with was that in facilities, they were having trouble with their nurses calling them and showing up on a timely basis. So we said, okay, great. Mark, let's put this into feel, felt, found. So he immediately looked at it and he said, I can certainly understand how you would feel if that happened. I know I would be unhappy if I feel like there was not good communication. As a matter of fact, all of the other facilities in town have told me the same thing. At which point, obviously, our training class started laughing and he realized that while following instructions, he was following it literally and not thinking about what he was saying. So again, you want to practice these responses after you've done them. So if they tell me, we've had a problem with your agency in the past and that's why we're not using you. I mean, what's the first thing out of my mouth? That's exactly why I'm here. I'm so glad you shared that with me. And why is that? Because if they don't tell you about the problems, you don't know. There's nothing you can do, right? Using the feel, felt, found. You're addressing a problem. So I can certainly understand how you might feel. But what others have told us is that we actually are able to work with their facility and develop customized protocols to make sure that the communication is going to be tailored to their needs. And they've found that actually we're able to communicate better than some of the other hospices in town. Tell me what happened. So you have the ability to walk them through and respond to whatever their objection was and get on to be able to have that next conversation. You know, there's a whole list of things that we've heard as objections. So if you're trying to make up your list of top 6, clearly we have a hospice we're happy with, should be in there. Our hospital has its own hospice agency, should be in there. Skilled facilities might say we have our own end-of-life program. We've had a problem with you in the past. You're the 20th hospice salesperson to come here today, like we don't need another hospice. Well, we let the patient choose. We're about patient choice. And you know what? If you hear that one, that can be a gold mine. And my response is going to be, they say, we're about patient choice. I'm going to get excited about it. I'm going to say, I am so glad you shared that with me. You are going to love working with our hospice program. We were founded on the very concept of patient choice. If there's a hospice in this area that's more focused on ensuring patient choice, I don't know of them. That's what we do and do best. Let's brainstorm on how we can help you make sure that your patients always have patient choice. Now, what do we know about somebody that tells us that they use patient choice? Many times, that's not the whole story. But we've told them that we're all about patient choice. Let's talk about it. You can ask questions then about, well, what's your process? You know, if the facility says we give the patient free brochures and let them select, then what's my goal? My goal is to be one of those 3 brochures. If I'm not one of the 3 brochures, I want to be one of the 3 brochures. If I am one of the 3 brochures, I want to find out how I can get them to put mine on top. Other questions that you might ask are, as part of your conversation around that is, well, what do you do, to a social worker, what do you do when the patient looks to you as the expert and says, who would you recommend? How do you answer that question? Again, we're looking for that information. We're looking for and uncovering the objections and handling them so that we can then move forward. We're not selling them anything. We're not winning the war. We're simply gaining the ability to have a further conversation. Now, we also get a lot of other examples as people come through class. One that comes up fairly commonly is physicians or others that say, well, you kill our patients. And, you know, at first blush, if you haven't heard that, you know, sometimes you may think that seems odd, or you may think that's funny, or whatever. But, you know, it may not be stated like that. There's other ways that it may be stated to you. But the fact is, that they don't buy into hospice. So what they're doing is they're referring patients to us very late. And if they're actively dying or they're very late in the process, they're going to die on our service in fairly short order, and it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. So you've got to figure out how you can break that cycle. But that's one that you may hear. Another one might be that you over-medicate the patients. And that could be globally, they feel that about hospice, or specifically about our agency. But that's one you need to be prepared to handle. And we were doing a training not too long ago, and one came up that I had never heard before. And it was this. They were talking to someone, and they said that the other hospice that they competed with had better looking nurses. Now, I'm not sure where that came from, and I doubt you would ever hear it. But if that's something that came up commonly, then I'd want to have it on my top 6 and have the response prepared. And for that particular salesperson, it was a common occurrence. So they put it on their list, developed that response, which was comfortable for them, and then they were able to handle that objection the next time it came up. So don't worry about those one-off situations, the ones that are the oddball things that we tend to kind of fixate on, because any one of those you can handle with a simple, I'm so glad you shared that with me. Tell me more about that. Okay, if you are at a loss for an answer, it wasn't on your top 6, you've never thought about it, you haven't figured out your feel, felt, found, you've always are armed with, that's exactly why I'm here. Or I'm so glad you brought that up. Because by saying that, 2 things happen. 1, you've said it's okay, which was our first step in handling objections. And 2, you've given yourself a few seconds to think about what you're going to say next. So if I say, I'm so glad you brought that up, let's talk about that. Tell me about why you say that. Tell me about the experiences you've had that led you to believe that. What happened? Those kind of questions then are going to get them talking about what's important to them, and you have moved past the objection, which they gave you as a no, and now you can move forward. So don't worry about the oddball ones. You've always got, that's exactly why I'm here, or I'm so glad you brought that up, or thank you for sharing that with me, that you can use in that situation. So there's absolutely, positively, not a single objection you can hear that you're not prepared to handle. Okay, so before we cut to the role play examples, let's talk about some more objections that you may hear. One of the best that you can hear, in my opinion, is somebody who tells you, we don't refer to hospice. We don't use hospice. Now you may be thinking, Mike, that seems odd that you would think that's the best thing I could hear. If they don't use hospice, how are they going to be a good referral source? And I'll tell you why it's exciting to me, because if that is truly the case, that they don't refer to hospice, and it's an internal medicine practice or some practice that would have patients who would be appropriate for hospice, then what a golden opportunity. If they truly don't refer to hospice, then you have the opportunity to help them see how they could use hospice in their practice to make their lives easier, make their patients better, and their outcomes better, and you're going to gain a nice big chunk of business. And again, it's expanding the community's use of our services, which is one of our major strategies. A similar objection is, I let the discharge planners handle it. Well, let me think about that. Again, I think that's one of the best ones you can get. If they truly practice medicine, and let's say it's a family practice, and their process is, I let the discharge planners handle it, what they're telling you is that someone has to be hospitalized before they would be considered for hospice. Is that not backwards? Is that not a huge opportunity? Is that not truly why we do what we do? If we can help that family practice see how they could be identifying these patients, referring them to hospice, and we could keep them out of the hospital, then we're getting people earlier, we're getting them better, and we're keeping them from having those acute episodes that end them up in the hospital and shorten their life expectancy. That's why when you look at data that suggests that CHF patients, in-state CHF patients, live 40-something days longer on a hospice program than not on a hospice program. It's because the hospice is able to keep them stable and keep them from those acute situations which causes them to decline more rapidly. So either of those, we don't use hospice or we let the discharge planners do it, are golden opportunities that you should be excited about. I mean, truly, if there's ever a time you're going to want to tell them, I am so glad we're having this conversation. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. You know, that's why I love my job. Because other family practitioners who told me the same thing the first time I met them found that there were patients at home, at risk, who could be kept out of the hospital by a referral to hospice. Let's talk about some of your most fragile patients. Do you see where the opportunity is there? I mean, it's just golden. What are you going to do if they say, oh, well, we let the primary care physician handle it? This is a specialist. Or the reverse side of that, the primary care physician that says, oh, we let the specialist refer. Again, a golden opportunity. If that's truly how they do it, then you can handle it. So if a specialist, a cardiologist says, we let the internal medicine people, the primary care physicians take care of it, then all you have to do is, again, use your feel, felt, found. Well, I can certainly understand how you feel. Other cardiologists have told me the same thing the first time I spoke with them. But what they found was, by us working with them and the family practitioner, with the primary care physician, we were able to effect the transfer of the patient to hospice sooner, which resulted in better outcomes for everybody. Let's talk about your processes and see how we can help with that. You want to get to the bottom of why they don't refer and let the primary care. Is it that they don't want to sign the orders? Great, we can totally handle that. That's no different than a hospitalist who's going to refer to hospice, but they don't want to sign the orders to follow the patient. Same thing with a specialist. But there's an opportunity there, but the key is you can't let that stop you in your tracks. You need to be prepared to answer it and be excited about it because it truly is a big opportunity. What are you going to do if they say, well, our hospital has its own hospice and you're a freestanding hospice provider? Well, number one, we talked about under competition, you're going to know what their hospice does and doesn't do. Key among that is you're going to know where they go. Many times a hospital-based hospice goes to a smaller service area than your hospice does. So it's easy to identify patients that you're not competing with their hospital-based hospice for. So what we're doing is we're carving out and not competing with that. So what would you say? We certainly understand and respect the relationship you have with your own hospice. Other hospitals that have the same relationship have found that we're able to serve their patients in the outlying areas where they don't go. Let's talk about which patients you're having challenges placing with your own hospice because they're outside of their service area. Or another tactic would be to talk to them about those patients that would be of a specific diagnosis type. Again, we're looking to carve out a little piece of the pie. What are those patients we can identify that would be logical for that discharge planner to refer to us without putting their neck on the line? What would they say if you asked them about the patients that their own hospice can't take? What if their hospice stopped admitting patients at 3 o'clock every day so they could get home on time? What if their hospice shut off admissions typically about midday on Friday because they were out of admission nurses and they don't do admissions on the weekend? If I know the competitor and I know what they do and what they don't do, then I'm prepared to have that conversation. And when they say, you know, we have our own hospice, you're able to say, of course you do, and we would not in any way, shape, or form want to interrupt that relationship. However, we've found with other hospices, or with other hospitals, that some of the times in the week, like after noon on Fridays or weekends, it's difficult to place a hospice patient and have them immediately admitted. We're able to see those patients. Tell me, does that ever happen with you? When do you have challenges? Okay, yet all of these are talking about why it is that we're not going to be able to see them. Another position you can take is handling the objection and then telling them, we'd like to be your first, second choice. What do we need to do to be the backup to your hospice? What do we need to do to be the first call you make when your preferred hospice can't take the patient? I hope that thinking about it in this form or fashion and going through some of these helps you to see it clearly in your mind. And as you listen to the role plays coming up, think about how you're going to formulate your 6 top objections and how you're going to handle them. And then you're going to need to role play with people in your organization so that when you use them, you're ready to go, you've got it down, and when they hit you with an objection, you're like, I got that one.
Lesson 2, the role play. So Dr. Smith, based on our conversation today, who can you think of that could benefit from our services?
Well, to be honest with you, everything you said sounds great, but we have another provider we work with.
Well, I understand that, but you know, really, Dr. Smith, you should have a couple of providers that you work with. That whole patient choice thing, it's always good to have at least 2 providers that you work with.
Really?
So let's talk some more about those CHF patients. Can you think of a CHF patient that you could send to us?
Well, I do have a lot of CHF patients, but I really don't know enough about you to feel comfortable referring to you just yet.
Oh, I totally understand that. I'll tell you what, I'm going to leave you with these brochures and things. This has everything that you need to know about our agency. I'll leave them with you. I'll check back with you next week, and then we can talk some more about those CHF patients.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so let's look at what went wrong with this handling of an objection. First off, you never want to tell a referral partner how to do their job. Anytime we get off on a rant and try and tell them what they ought to be doing or how they should do their job, you will absolutely, positively lose them. Telling them that they should have patient choice is right up that alley. All you do is shut them down, and that's not going to get you anywhere. It's certainly not handling their objection. It's getting argumentative, not handling an objection. In handling an objection, we talked about the first rule is to make it right. It's okay. Of course you feel that way. And then they decide to just leave brochures without ever pointing anything out in the brochure. They haven't handled the objection. They haven't provided any benefits either from the brochures or from working with them. And all of this has got to leave them with a bad taste in their mouth. So the only thing we could potentially find that would have been okay with this call is that at the very least they got a commitment to come back the following week, though in all probabilities they really are not going to get much in the way of a referral, certainly not based on this initial call, certainly not from handling the objection because they didn't handle it. Let's look at another call where they're handling an objection and see how that worked.
So, Dr. Smith, based on our conversation today, who can you think of that could benefit from the services we discussed?
Well, to be honest, everything you said sounds great, but we have another provider we work with.
I understand. I would expect you to have at least one provider that you work with. All of my referring physicians actually told me the same thing when I first met with them. What they found, though, was that we were the best choice to help them manage the needs of their CHF patients in their home.
Well, I do have a lot of CHF patients, but I don't know enough about you to feel comfortable referring my patients yet.
Well, that's exactly why I'm here. Let's talk specifically about how our agency can meet your needs and the needs of your CHF patients. I want you to have enough information to feel confident in sending us your next CHF patient.
You mentioned a cardiac team. Can you tell me more about them?
Absolutely. In fact, if you'd like to meet them, I can arrange for that.
That would be great.
Okay, I'll set it up then. How about next Wednesday at this time, about 3?
I'll have Mary put it on my calendar.
Okay, great.
Well, I think you'll agree that that went much better. So what happened? We got an objection that you all hear on a regular basis. They already have somebody they work with. And our salesperson did a good job of giving them the feel, felt, found. Of course you'd have somebody you work with. I would expect you to have at least one hospice to work with. The fact that all of the referring physicians told them the same thing the first time they met them, but what they found was that they were really the best chance to help them manage the needs of their end-stage CHF patients in their home. So what did we do? We handled the objection, we gave them a benefit, and the doctor came right back with the fact that they do have a lot of CHF patients. But they didn't know enough about the agency to feel comfortable referring to them. Good, honest answer. Wouldn't you like it if all referral partners would tell you that that's all they needed to know was a little bit more, instead of hiding behind all the ruses and smoke screens? So the sales rep, great opportunity to use our favorite line, "That's exactly why I'm here." And let's talk about how we can meet the specific needs of your CHF patients, and that they wanted them to have enough information so they'd feel very confident sending their next CHF patient. The doctor brought up the cardiac team, asked about them. The sales rep suggested that they'd bring the cardiac team back by, and the doctor liked that. And the sales rep said, "Well, I'll set it up then," got the time set, and it got put on the calendar. So about the only thing we could have done better there is getting a final close into that example. So let's listen to one more example that I think you'll agree goes pretty darn good.
So, Dr. Smith, based on our conversation today, who can you think of that could benefit from the services we discussed?
Well, to be honest, everything you said sounded great. We have another provider we work with.
I understand. I would expect you to have at least one provider that you work with. In fact, all of my referring physicians that I work with now told me the same thing when I first met with them. What they found was that we were the best choice to help them manage their CHF patients in their home.
Well, we do have a lot of CHF patients, but I don't know enough about you to really feel comfortable referring my patients.
Well, that's exactly why I'm here. Let's talk specifically about how our agency can meet your needs and the needs of your CHF patients. I want you to have enough information that you feel confident referring us that next CHF patient.
You mentioned a cardiac team. Can you tell me more about them?
Absolutely. In fact, if you'd like, I can arrange to have you meet with them.
Well, that would be great.
Okay. Well, why don't I set it up, have them come in here and meet with you next week, Wednesday, about 3 o'clock?
Have Mary put it on my calendar.
I will do that. And Dr. Smith, if I can build your confidence in our cardiac program, would you agree to send us your next CHF patient?
Well, ask me again next week, but yes, I can probably do that.
Well, that's the end of the role plays on overcoming objections, but I hope it's just the starting point for you in practicing how you're going to overcome objections. I personally think that overcoming objections can be a lot of fun, so I hope that you will be role playing with those around you and having a lot of fun with it.
There is no objection you can't overcome. Remember that overcoming an objection is about getting past it, not proving the customer wrong. There are 3 ways to overcome objections. Use the first 2 methods, "That's exactly why I'm here," and "Feel, felt, found," to get past objections and continue the conversation with your customer. The third method for overcoming an objection is to be prepared for it. Make a list of the top 6 objections you hear in your market and prepare for how you will overcome those. That way, when facing the objection, you will have a plan for getting past it. So do you feel ready to handle any objection? Being able to do so will put you head and shoulders above most of the best hospice sales reps, and listening to that section again will further cement your ability to simply pull that tool out of your toolbox and be able to handle anything that comes your way. This next section is the very last component to learn for your actual sales calls themselves. This is your power drill, your most advanced and powerful tool to have at your fingertips. This last component is what separates the good hospice sales reps from the great ones, and is all about building relationships with your referral sources by asking strategic questions and finding out exactly what they need. It's called needs-based selling, and it could make all the difference in the world between a solid relationship with your referral source and an unbreakable one. Ready to learn about needs assessment? Let's pop in the next CD.